The sound of construction equipment rumbling to life jolted me awake at 6:15 a.m. on a Saturday. I groaned, pulling my pillow over my head, but the incessant beeping of a backup alarm made it impossible to drift back to sleep. When the distinct crack of a tree falling echoed through my bedroom window, I shot up in bed. "What the hell?" I muttered, stumbling to the window. My eyes widened in disbelief at the scene unfolding in my backyard. 3 bulldozers, an excavator, and a team of workers in hard hats were tearing up the wooded section of my property. My property. The land I'd purchased 5 years ago specifically for its privacy and natural beauty. I threw on sweatpants and a t-shirt, not bothering with shoes as I raced outside, the dewy grass cold beneath my feet. "Hey, hey," I shouted, waving my arms frantically. "What are you doing? This is private property." A man in a white hard hat looked up, his expression annoyingly unconcerned. "We're building the connector road, sir. Please stand back for your safety." "Connector road? What connector road? This is my land." I gestured wildly at my house behind me. "I'm Paul Anderson. I own this property." The foreman glanced at a clipboard. "We have all the necessary permits and approvals from Willow Creek Estates, HOA. He held up a document with official-looking stamps. "Construction schedule's been posted for 3 months." "I never approved this. I'm not even part of Willow Creek Estates," I sputtered, my anger mounting. "I bought this land before the development was even built." The foreman shrugged, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to stop work. "You'll need to take it up with the HOA board. We're just doing what we're contracted to do." I stormed back inside, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the contact information for Willow Creek Estates' infamous homeowners association. My 5-acre property bordered their newer development, but I deliberately purchased my land before they broke ground specifically to avoid their notorious restrictions. After several attempts, I finally reached someone. "Willow Creek Estates, HOA, this is Margaret speaking." The voice was crisp, professional, and utterly unconcerned. "This is Paul Anderson. There are construction workers cutting down trees on my property claiming to build a road with HOA authorization. I never approved this, and I'm not even a member of your association." "Mr. Anderson, yes. The connecting road project was approved by the board last fall. We sent numerous notices." "To where?" "I never received any notices because, again, I'm not a member of your HOA. According to our records, your property was incorporated into our jurisdiction when the Phase 3 expansion was approved by the county." My blood pressure skyrocketed. "That's impossible. I specifically purchased before your development existed to avoid being part of any HOA." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Anderson, but this road is necessary to connect our new section with Maple Drive. The plans have been finalized for months. Perhaps you should attend our monthly meetings if you want to stay informed." "Stop the construction now," I demanded. "Or I'm calling the police." "That's your right, Mr. Anderson, but our permits are in order. The police will simply confirm that. Our next board meeting is Tuesday at 7 p.m. if you'd like to formally address your concerns." I hung up and immediately called the police. 20 minutes later, Officer Jenkins stood in my yard, reviewing the permits the foreman had provided. "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson, but these permits appear to be in order," he said, looking genuinely sympathetic. "This is technically a civil matter. You'll need to take it up with the county planning department and possibly get a lawyer involved." "They're building a road through my property without my permission," I protested. "How is that legal?" "According to these documents, there's an easement that was granted for this connector road." He pointed to a section of the permit. "Did you check for easements when you purchased the property?" 5 years ago, when I bought this peaceful woodland retreat, I'd been so focused on escaping city life that I'd skimmed some of the finer details of the property survey. The real estate agent had mentioned something about a utility easement along the eastern boundary, but nothing about a potential road. After Officer Jenkins left, promising to document my complaint, I spent the rest of the weekend watching helplessly as my trees disappeared, and a rough dirt road took shape through what had once been my private nature trail. By Monday morning, I'd contacted 3 different lawyers and was waiting for callbacks. The county planning office was my first stop Monday morning. After an hour of waiting, I finally sat across from a balding man named Greg, who seemed more interested in his upcoming lunch break than my property crisis. "Yes, Mr. Anderson, I see the issue here." He adjusted his glasses, scrolling through digital records. There was indeed an old utility and transportation easement registered with this property dating back to the 1970s. It was never activated until Willow Creek Estates purchased the adjacent land and petitioned to utilize it for their Phase 3 development. But I was never notified, I insisted. Actually, he turned his monitor so I could see it. Notifications were sent to all affected property owners last year. We have delivery confirmation to your address. I vaguely remembered tossing some official-looking mail from the county, assuming it was related to property tax assessments. My stomach sank. Even so, they can't just build a road through my backyard. The easement is quite clear. It permits utility lines and a connecting roadway along that specific corridor. Greg's tone was maddeningly bureaucratic. The HOA followed proper procedures to activate it. So they can just take part of my land for their private neighborhood. It's not taking if the easement was already in place when you purchased. And technically, once completed, it will be a public access road, not a private HOA road. I left the county offices feeling defeated but not ready to surrender. By Wednesday, I'd consulted with a property rights attorney named Deanna Reyes, who reviewed my deed and the easement documentation. "I won't sugarcoat this, Paul," she said, leaning forward across her desk. "The easement is legitimate, and they followed proper procedures to activate it. Fighting this in court would be expensive with minimal chance of success. So I just let them build a road through my property, watch my privacy and property value vanish, not necessarily." Deanna tapped her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. "The easement grants them the right to build the road, but it doesn't specify anything about controlling access to it." "What do you mean?" "The easement documentation states that the corridor must allow for reasonable transportation access between adjoining properties. But since the road will be on your property, albeit within the easement area, there may be room for interpretation about what constitutes reasonable access." A slow smile spread across my face as an idea took shape. "So if I wanted to, say, install a gate on my property?" Deanna's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "I couldn't officially advise that as a strategy, but I would note that the easement doesn't explicitly prohibit structures that don't permanently block access." Over the next few days, as construction crews continued transforming my peaceful woodland into a compacted dirt road, I researched gate systems, toll booths, and property rights. I discovered that, while I couldn't prevent the road's construction, I could potentially control how it was used, especially if I framed my actions as reasonable accommodations, rather than outright obstruction. On Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd been awakened by construction equipment, the crews finished the initial phase of the road, a packed dirt pathway cutting through what had once been my favorite walking trail. They'd be returning Monday to begin laying gravel and eventually asphalt, according to the timeline they'd reluctantly shared with me. That gave me the weekend to implement my plan. I called my buddy Owen, who worked in construction, and together we spent Saturday driving to home improvement stores and gathering materials. By Sunday afternoon, we had installed a simple but sturdy manual gate across the newly formed dirt road, just inside my property line. I added a small booth beside it, complete with a folding chair and a hand-painted sign. "Anderson Private Road Toll, $5 per crossing." "You sure about this, Paul?" Owen asked as we admired our handiwork. "That HOA seems pretty intense." "I'm just providing reasonable access as the easement requires," I replied, trying to keep a straight face. Nowhere does it say that access has to be free, Owen laughed, shaking his head. Well, I want front row seats for whatever happens next. I didn't have to wait long. At 7:30 a.m. Monday, the construction crew arrived to find their path blocked by my gate. What's this supposed to be? The foreman demanded, pointing at my creation. I sat comfortably in my toll booth, coffee mug in hand. This is how I'm managing access to the road on my property. $5 per vehicle. This is ridiculous. We have work to do. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the project manager. Feel free, I said pleasantly. I'll be right here. By 8:15, I had a small audience. 3 construction vehicles were idling on one side of my gate, and 2 Willow Creek residents had driven up from the other direction, curious about why the promised connecting road wasn't accessible. At 8:30, a sleek black SUV pulled up and a woman in her mid-50s emerged, her blonde bob perfectly styled and her expression thunderous. She marched up to my booth, designer handbag swinging from her arm. Mr. Anderson, I presume. I'm Patricia Westfield, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. What exactly do you think you're doing? Good morning, Miss Westfield. I'm simply managing access to the road that crosses my property, as is my right as the property owner. This is obstruction. We have legal permits for this road. I'm not obstructing anything, I replied calmly. The gate opens easily once the toll is paid, $5 per crossing, or you can purchase a weekly pass for $25, her face flushed with anger. This is preposterous. This road is meant to be a public access way, and the public is welcome to access it for $5 per crossing. The easement specifies that there must be reasonable access between the properties. It doesn't say that access must be free or unregulated. We'll see about that. She stabbed at her phone screen. I'm calling our attorney right now. While Patricia made her call, one of the construction workers approached my booth and silently handed me a $5 bill. I thanked him, opened the gate, and he drove his pickup through. His colleagues watched in disbelief. Jake, what are you doing? The foreman shouted. The worker shrugged. I'm on the clock, man. Company's paying me whether I sit here arguing or get to work. $5 seems worth it to avoid the headache. By 9:00 a.m., most of the construction crew had followed Jake's example, paying the toll and proceeding to work. Patricia remained on site, having multiple heated phone conversations while occasionally shooting me venomous glares. Around 10:30, she approached my booth again. Our attorney says you're violating the spirit of the easement agreement. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but not the letter of it. I'm providing access just as required. This won't stand. The county will revoke your right to operate this illegal toll booth. It's not a toll booth, I corrected her. It's an access management station on private property, and until someone with actual authority tells me otherwise, I'll continue providing reasonable, controlled access to this roadway. Patricia left in a huff, and I settled in for what I knew would be a long battle of wills. By the end of the first day, I'd collected $135 in tolls, not a fortune, but enough to make a point. The next morning, Patricia returned with reinforcements. Margaret from the HOA office and a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit who introduced himself as Tyler, the HOA's attorney. Mr. Anderson, Tyler began, I've reviewed the easement documentation, and while it doesn't explicitly prohibit what you're doing, your actions clearly contradict the intended purpose of a public access road. I'm familiar with the documentation, I replied. The easement grants permission for a road, but nowhere does it state that I surrender all rights to the property it crosses. As the landowner, I maintain certain privileges, including the right to manage access in a reasonable manner. Charging people to use a public road is not reasonable, Patricia interjected. It's not a public road yet, I pointed out. Currently, it's a construction site on private property. And even when completed, the easement doesn't automatically make it public property, it simply allows for transit between the adjoining developments. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Anderson has a technical point. The easement doesn't convert his property to public land, it merely grants a right of passage. Patricia's eyes narrowed. So what are you saying? We just let him extort money from our residents forever. I'm saying we might need to seek clarification from the county on the exact parameters of the easement, Tyler replied. I smiled pleasantly. In the meantime, the toll remains $5, cash or mobile payment accepted. By the end of the first week, my toll operation had become something of a local attraction. Residents from Willow Creek Estates would drive up, some angrily paying the fee while complaining loudly, others finding the whole situation amusing. A few neighbors from my side of the development, who had their own grievances with the aggressive HOA, occasionally brought me coffee or snacks as a show of support. The construction continued, with workers grudgingly paying the toll each morning and evening. I adjusted my schedule to ensure the gate was manned from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, recruiting a few friends to cover shifts when I needed to work my regular job remotely from the booth or take breaks. During the second week, Patricia changed tactics. Instead of confronting me directly, she organized Willow Creek residents to protest my toll gate. On Wednesday morning, I arrived to find a dozen people with handmade signs marching in a circle near my booth. "Stop the toll troll," read one sign. "Public roads for public use," declared another. I waved cheerfully as I set up for the day, which only seemed to infuriate them further. The local news caught wind of the protest, and by afternoon, a reporter from Channel 8 was interviewing both Patricia and me about the dispute. "Mr. Anderson, don't you think it's unfair to charge people to use a road that's meant to benefit the community?" the reporter asked. "What's unfair is having a road forced through my property without my consent," I replied. "I purchased this land specifically for its privacy and natural setting. The HOA activated an old easement without meaningful consultation with me, destroyed a section of my private woodland, and now expects unrestricted access. The toll is my way of reclaiming some control over my own property." The story aired that evening, and public opinion seemed divided. Some viewers thought I was being petty, others sympathized with my position. Either way, the publicity brought even more curious visitors to see the toll gate standoff for themselves. By the third week, the HOA had filed a formal complaint with the county, seeking clarification on the easement terms and requesting an injunction against my toll operation. The county scheduled a hearing for the following month, but until then, I was free to continue. Construction of the road progressed despite the controversy. The dirt path was now covered with gravel, and preparations were underway for asphalt paving. With each phase of development, I watched more of my peaceful woodland disappear beneath construction equipment. Patricia escalated her campaign against me, distributing flyers throughout Willow Creek Estates detailing my unreasonable and possibly illegal extortion scheme. She even attempted to organize a boycott of the road, encouraging residents to use the longer route around my property instead of paying the toll. This backfired spectacularly when several residents discovered that the alternative route added 15 minutes to their commutes. Slowly, most gave in and began paying the toll, though rarely without expressing their displeasure. During the fourth week, my attorney Deanna informed me that the HOA had offered a settlement. They would pay me a one-time sum of $2,000 if I removed the gate permanently. "They're getting desperate," Deanna observed. "The negative publicity is hurting their image, and residents are complaining about both the toll and the HOA's handling of the situation." I declined the offer without hesitation. This was never about money. It's about principle and the fact that they steamrolled over my property rights. "What is it about then? What would make you consider removing the gate?" Deanna asked. I thought for a moment. "Acknowledgement, accountability, and some tangible compensation for the destruction of my property and privacy." Deanna nodded. "I'll communicate that you're open to negotiation but not on their current terms." The following day, Patricia arrived with a new proposal. A public apology from the HOA board, a decorative barrier of trees and shrubs along both sides of the road to restore some privacy to my property, and $5,000 compensation. And removal of the toll gate, of course, she added, as though this were a minor detail. The offer is interesting, I acknowledged, but incomplete. What more could you possibly want? Patricia demanded, exasperation evident in her voice. I want written acknowledgement that while the easement allows for the road, my property rights remain in effect. I want formal consultation on any future decisions that affect my property. And I want the right to close the gate between midnight and 5 a.m. for security purposes. Patricia's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. I'll have to discuss this with the board. Take your time, I said, gesturing to the line of cars waiting to pay the toll. Business is good. 2 days later, Patricia returned with Tyler and another board member, a stern-faced woman named Olivia Russell, who'd recently moved into one of the luxury homes in Phase 3. Mr. Anderson, Olivia began, her tone clipped and professional. As the newest member of the board, I've reviewed this situation with fresh eyes. While I believe the HOA acted within its legal rights in activating the easement, I also recognize that our communication with you was inadequate. That's putting it mildly, I muttered. Nevertheless, she continued, we want to resolve this situation amicably. We're prepared to meet most of your terms, including the written acknowledgement of your continued property rights, future consultation requirements, and the nighttime closure of the gate provided it can be opened in emergencies. I raised an eyebrow. And the other compensation. The decorative barrier and $5,000 remain on the table, Tyler interjected. Along with a public statement from the board acknowledging that we should have engaged in more direct communication with you before beginning construction. I considered their offer. It addressed my main concerns and provided some restoration of the privacy I'd lost. More importantly, it established that even with the easement, the HOA couldn't simply do whatever they wanted with my land. I'll need everything in writing, reviewed by my attorney, I said finally. Of course, Tyler agreed, looking relieved. Patricia remained silent throughout the exchange, her tight smile barely concealing her frustration at having to compromise. As they turned to leave, I called after them, one more thing. They paused, looking back warily. The toll remains in effect until the agreement is signed and the compensation paid, $5 per crossing. Olivia actually smiled slightly at this, while Patricia's face flushed with barely contained anger. The formal agreement took another week to finalize. During that time, I continued collecting tolls, amassing nearly $3,000 in what I now thought of as my principal protection fund. I planned to use it to plant new trees elsewhere on my property to replace those that had been removed for the road. Once Deanna confirmed that the agreement protected my interests and included all the terms we'd negotiated, I signed it at a special HOA board meeting. Patricia's signature was noticeably rigid, her pen pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. The following morning, I removed the toll booth and replaced it with a more attractive gate that could be closed overnight but left open during the day. The HOA hired a landscaping company to install a row of fast-growing evergreens along both sides of the road, creating a green barrier that would eventually restore some privacy to my property. As part of the agreement, the road was named Anderson Pass, a small but satisfying acknowledgement of whose land it crossed. A discreet sign was installed explaining that the road closed from midnight to 5 a.m., with an emergency call box for after-hours access if needed. The publicity surrounding our dispute had unexpected consequences. Other homeowners in the area who felt bullied by various HOAs reached out to share their stories and seek advice. I found myself becoming something of a reluctant advocate for property rights, occasionally speaking at county meetings when easement issues arose. Olivia, surprisingly, turned out to be a reasonable addition to the HOA board. She instituted new communication protocols, requiring direct consultation with any non-HOA property owners affected by their decisions. Patricia, on the other hand, stepped down from her position as president 6 months later, citing personal reasons that everyone knew were related to the embarrassment of the toll gate incident. The completed road actually improved my property value, providing easier access while the privacy barrier of trees minimized the visual impact. The agreement ensuring my continued rights over the property gave me peace of mind that the HOA couldn't make further incursions without proper consultation and compensation. 1 year after the construction crews first appeared on my property, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue that included residents from both my area and Willow Creek estates. As we enjoyed food and conversation, I overheard one of my neighbors explaining the toll gate saga to a new resident. "You should have seen their faces when Paul set up that booth," he chuckled. "First time anyone had ever stood up to that HOA and won." "I wouldn't say I won," I interjected, joining their conversation, "but I did make my point." "Which was what exactly?" the new resident asked. I thought for a moment, watching children play on both sides of what had once been the battle line between my property and Willow Creek estates. That even when you're faced with something that seems unstoppable, you can still find a way to maintain your dignity and rights. Sometimes you just need to be creative about it. The new resident nodded thoughtfully. "I heard they're trying to add speed bumps on Maple Drive now. Think I should build a toll booth too." We all laughed, but part of me wondered if Patricia, who'd recently moved to a new development across town, was already causing trouble with her new HOA. Some people never learn, but I definitely taught this one a lesson about respecting property rights, even if it meant charging tolls until they got the message. As the years passed, Anderson Pass became just another road in the community, the story of its controversial beginning fading into local legend. Occasionally, someone would ask about the decorative gate that closed each night, or why this particular stretch of road had such an attractive tree-lined barrier when others didn't. I'd smile and tell them it was a long story about property rights, principle, and the $5 fee that made a point no one in Willow Creek Estates would ever forget. The landscaping matured, creating the natural screen I'd hoped for, and the overnight closure of the gate maintained the peaceful atmosphere I'd sought when purchasing the property. Most importantly, the written agreement ensured that any future HOA boards would think twice before assuming they could make decisions affecting my land without proper consultation. Life settled into a new normal. The road provided convenient access to shops and amenities, previously requiring a lengthy detour, and the initial animosity between me and the Willow Creek residents gradually transformed into mutual respect. Well, from most residents, Patricia still glared whenever our paths crossed, which thankfully became increasingly rare. 5 years after the toll gate incident, the county proposed widening several roads in the area to accommodate growing traffic. When the proposal included Anderson Pass, the HOA immediately contacted me as required by our agreement. "Mr. Anderson," began the new HOA president, a reasonable man named Michael, "the county has approached us about potentially widening the road through your property. Before we even discuss it with them, we wanted to get your thoughts." I appreciated the courtesy. "I'm not interested in losing more of my land to an expanded roadway," I told him firmly. "The current width is sufficient." "I completely understand," Michael replied. "We'll inform the county that this section isn't available for widening and suggest they focus on alternate routes." That simple conversation, which might never have happened without our formal agreement, prevented another potential conflict. The county adjusted their plans, leaving Anderson Pass at its original width while expanding other roadways in the area. The landscaping company I'd hired to plant new trees elsewhere on my property became a regular visitor, helping me create a series of nature paths and gardens that enhanced both the beauty and value of my land. I'd turned the destruction of one section of woodland into an opportunity to improve the rest, using some of my principal protection fund to create an even more appealing natural environment. Occasionally, I'd encounter one of the construction workers who'd built the road, many of whom still worked on various projects around the community. Jake, the first to pay my toll, always greeted me with a knowing grin. "Still got that toll booth in your garage?" He asked once while working on a nearby project. "Actually, I donated it to the local historical society," I replied. "They have a small exhibit about unusual local disputes." He laughed. "Smart move with that toll. Never seen an HOA back down so quickly once the media got involved." "Just protecting what's mine," I said simply. 7 years after the incident, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Westfield stood at my front door, looking older but no less formidable. "Mr. Anderson," she said stiffly, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, genuinely curious about her presence. "What can I do for you?" "I'm moving again," she announced. "Leaving the area entirely. Before I go, I wanted to clear the air." I invited her in, offering coffee, which she declined. "I still believe we acted within our rights with that easement," she said once seated in my living room. "But I acknowledge that our approach was heavy-handed. Coming from Patricia, this was practically a groveling apology." "I appreciate you saying that," I responded. "For what it's worth, I understand the HOA's desire to create better connectivity between the developments. I just couldn't accept the way it was done." She nodded curtly. "Your toll booth strategy was clever. Annoying, but clever." "High praise indeed," I said, unable to suppress a small smile. As she left, Patricia paused at the door. "The trees look nice," she admitted, gesturing toward the now mature evergreens lining Anderson Pass. "Better than just a plain road would have been." It was as close to a compliment as I'd ever received from her, and I accepted it with a nod. The legend of the toll gate grew over time, occasionally resurfacing when other homeowners faced similar battles with overreaching HOAs. I sometimes received emails or calls from strangers asking for advice on how to protect their property rights, and I always emphasized the importance of reading documents carefully, understanding easements before purchasing property, and being creative when conventional approaches fail. 10 years after the road construction, Willow Creek Estates celebrated its anniversary with a community festival. To my surprise, I received a formal invitation, along with a request to say a few words about the neighborhood's history. When I took the small stage set up in the community park, I saw many familiar faces, residents who had once angrily paid my toll now smiling in recognition. "When I first encountered Willow Creek Estates," I began, "it wasn't under the best circumstances. A road appeared on my property, trees disappeared, and a toll booth materialized in response." Chuckles rippled through the audience. "But what started as a conflict evolved into something else, a lesson about communication, respect for property rights, and finding creative solutions to seemingly intractable problems." I gestured toward Anderson Pass, visible in the distance. "That road now connects our communities in more ways than one. It reminds us that even when we disagree, we can find common ground or at least a reasonably priced crossing." More laughter followed. The trees lining that road represent more than just a privacy screen. They're a reminder that compromise doesn't mean surrender, and that with goodwill on both sides, conflicts can transform into cooperation. As I concluded my remarks, Michael presented me with a humorous gift, a miniature toll booth for my desk, complete with a tiny barrier gate that actually raised and lowered. The plaque on its base read, "In recognition of standing your ground while finding middle road." That evening, as I walked home along Anderson Pass, I admired how the landscape had healed itself. The road no longer felt like an invasion but simply another feature of the property, one with an interesting story behind it. The decorative gate, which still closed each night, served as both a security measure and a symbol of the boundaries I'd successfully defended. My impromptu toll booth had long since been replaced by something more attractive, but its legacy endured in the formal agreement that protected my rights and in the cautious respect with which the HOA now approached any decisions affecting non-member properties. Sometimes the most effective way to make a point isn't through courts or confrontation, but through creative resistance that forces the other party to negotiate. As I reached my driveway, I paused to look back at Anderson Pass stretching toward Willow Creek Estates, the trees along its borders silhouetted against the sunset. What had once been a source of anger and frustration had transformed into something I could view with a certain pride, not just for standing my ground, but for finding a solution that ultimately benefited everyone while protecting what mattered most. The $5 toll that had started as a desperate measure had turned into something much more valuable: respect for property rights, acknowledgement of boundaries, and a reminder that sometimes the most effective response to overreach isn't outrage but ingenuity. And if that ingenious response happens to generate a few $1,000s in toll revenue along the way, well, that's just a bonus for the principle of the thing.